There are a lot of Volkswagen SUVs now, and you guys wanted to see them all in one episode. And here is our present for you. We got the Volkswagen T-Cross, the T-Roc, the Tiguan Allspace, or just Tiguan in the US, the longer version, and the big Touareg. And since we don't have a German registration for Volkswagen Atlas, we will also show you some details and photos of the Atlas from our previous videos. But here we got 5 on the stage. Really cool episode in exterior differences, size, styling, and of course the different interiors. What about the comfort differences and of course the room you have on the interior? And how do they differ in driving? What are the differences there? We will experience everything together in full HD, full screen and full length. Let's go. We're at the Autostadt in Wolfsburg here today, just near to the main plant, and we can use the Autostadt facilities here to show you the SUVs. And I want to play a little game with you today, because when we go through the different vehicles, I want you to tell me later in the comments which one is your favorite in exterior, interior and driving and overall. Maybe it's the same vehicle in all 4 segments, or maybe you prefer one of them in exterior, one of them in interior and so on. Really looking forward to that. We start with the T-Cross, the new smallest SUV in the VW lineup, and you can see it is characterized by this very upright front. It rather, you'll soon see that, it rather looks like a small Touareg. That's very interesting. Here also in this turquoise color, very interesting, named after a Hawaiian island. And option you can get LED, halogen is standard. This is the R-Line Sportier variant of that. And then it's a little bit strange here, because next to me the T-Roc is the bigger brother. So, whereas the T-Cross is rather the Polo SUV, the T-Roc is the Golf SUV. But since it has a little smoother front, it's not that much upright than the T-Cross, it looks smaller from the front than the T-Cross. This is a really interesting finding, you know. So, however, still has a strong SUV front, but not as strong as with the T-Cross. And you can see the special thing, design element with the T-Roc is that we have those LED daytime running lights here in the lower area. And those ones are also, by the way, the turning indicators. So let me just activate the turning indicators here on the right side. And then you'll see that they basically then replace the daytime running light. So very interesting idea, and I think, you know, why not? Then we move over to the next bigger brother. This one is the Tiguan. This is probably also one of the most famous ones. And it has a typical SUV styling also in the front, horizontal with the chrome here, different versions available. You can see here the VW logo is 2D because a lot of sensors are hidden behind that. The daytime running light, those ones here also, again, the optional LED headlamps. They look a little bit different depending on which headlamps you pick. Also, this front grille is different depending on, if you go for the top spec here, then you have this dual chrome horizontal fin. If you don't have the LED lights, there's also a black fin there. So it definitely looks better in this way, but of course, it's always extra cost then for those headlamps. And this one here is the Tiguan Allspace. This version is also somewhat sold in the US. So it's just called Tiguan in the US, but it's always basically the one we get as Allspace in Europe. Is just short wheelbase versus long wheelbase, and 5-seater versus possible 7-seater. You can get the Allspace, or the just called Tiguan in the US. You can get it as a 5-seater, but also then if you want as a 7-seater. So, you know, if you need some more people to transport from time to time. Colors, of course, free to pick. And then we have the Touareg, the biggest one that is sold in Europe. For us, it's a full-size SUV. And there you can see it has some similar styling to the T-Cross, doesn't it? Really interesting for sure. And of course, this very strong hood. This one is the luxury SUV from the lineup. And above that is the Volkswagen Atlas. We can show you some pictures there, which we took earlier with a static review, for example, also at our driving reviews. The Atlas is even bigger than the Touareg, and it's primarily sold for the US market or as Terramont in the Chinese market. And it's a very interesting vehicle because, yeah, it's longer and bigger than the Touareg, but it's approximately just half the price. That's very interesting. So the Atlas sold about $30,000 start entry price in the US. And if we go back down now the ladder again with prices, so the Atlas $30,000 approximately. The Touareg $60,000. Of course, will get more expensive easily. The Tiguan Allspace and the Tiguan, there's just about 1,000 euros difference between around 30,000. So what we pay for the Tiguan here is what guys in the US pay for the Atlas. Very interesting. And then for the smaller ones, the compact ones, the T-Roc just above 20,000 and the T-Cross just below 20,000. Entry prices, of course, each. So what do you think for the first glance? Which one is your favorite? Now taking a look at the side profiles, we always state you the length in meters and feet below, so you can better remember those. And this one here, 4 meters 11 with the T-Cross, the smallest one, but you can see it's also the most daring design here in the side profile with this dual dropping line here at the side profile. And you can see it's pretty much upright, and this actually ensures that you have still enough room left on the interior, although it's the shortest of those cars. All SUVs here, by the way, with 18-inch rims, except the Touareg. So all the following will all have the same 18-inch rims. Pretty strong here, of course, for the smallest car already. The smallest length step is from the T-Cross to the T-Roc. This is only about 10 centimeters difference. The T-Roc has, let's say, the most conservative styling. It more looks like a compact hatch, which was put a little bit higher. So not this typical SUV styling, rather a little bit of crossover styling. This one here is characterized also by this forward-standing C-pillar you can see here, especially in the orange shape. And you can also get contrasting roof colors. Then 20 centimeters approximate difference to the Tiguan, which is then the mid-size SUV. At least when we have European mid-size and full-size measurements. Again, 18-inch rims. This one here also my favorite color. We call it Thomas Blue on Autogefuehl. You can see the chrome frame, and remember this chrome frame here, because the European Tiguan or the short wheelbase Tiguan will have the window frame like this. It will be a little bit different now with the Allspace, I'm soon going to show you. Also with the contrasting lower bumper to get this off-road look. There will also be a real Tiguan off-road version available, we can also show you. Because that one then includes an underfloor cover and also a bigger approaching angle than in the front, then raising up to 24 degrees in the front. The Tiguan Allspace, or also the US Tiguan, see here, the rear window line, it raises up a little bit more. There you can really differentiate. You see, it raises here a little bit, and with the normal Tiguan, it stays more, a little bit low and has this kink there. Not really a Hofmeister kink here as with BMW. And you can also see that the rear door is longer, overall car again a little bit longer, and also this almost 20 centimeter gap then, just to have some more rear legroom and ensure this 7-seater setup. Overall, the Tiguan has a rather conservative styling too, but it's, I think, a very elegant one for sure. Then the luxury package with the Touareg, again approximately a 20 centimeter gap. Another gain in length, but this one here is basically the biggest price step in the whole SUV range, aiming at the luxury SUV market, and of course it looks way more massive than any other of those. Main dropping design line here, today in white, it even appears a little bit bigger, and here we also have 20-inch rims mounted. Well, and then the Volkswagen Atlas, which is even bigger, even longer, again almost a little bit less than 20 centimeters longer than the Touareg here, and it looks more angular. This is also one thing that gives you more room on the interior, so you lose less space as for the design. And it's basically one of the best packages overall if you think about what size the car has, what room it offers, and what price you actually pay for. So too bad we cannot get it in Germany or in Europe. But then again, for some of the narrow roads we have here, it would maybe also be too big. Or what do you guys think? I really love this perspective, I can tell you. So we put them all that they are basically even at the rear, and there you can see that in the front it is really step by step by step by step. Of course, the perspective is always a little bit deceiving, so you cannot really see from the perspective that the smallest difference is indeed from the first to the second one, from the T-Cross in turquoise to the orange T-Roc. And then from there on, from orange T-Roc to the blue Tiguan, from the Tiguan to the brown Tiguan Allspace, and to the white Touareg, all about 20 centimeters each. And well, I would be the Volkswagen Atlas now, as I'm in the last in the row. And now I'll look at the rear perspectives. Really impressive here in this little bit more darker lighting. Then we can more see the LED signature. And the T-Cross here has the biggest standalone signature. By the way, this middle party is a reflector, depending on where the light is coming from. So it's not a light in itself, it's a reflector stripe in the middle part. But again, the most daring design for sure. And I think it's also good to show something fresh for sure. Then the T-Roc has some similarities with the Golf just in the rear. It is basically a little bit put up Golf, but also has those LED daytime signature lights, which are somehow similar to the Tiguan next to you right there. Here the interesting design element is that we have those triangles inside, but still the signature itself is a little bit similar from the T-Roc to the Tiguan. It is somewhat also typical of the MQB rear, the modular transverse building platform in the Volkswagen AG. They all are somewhat similar in the rear for sure, but they all have a rather clean and simple design. I think good design is also about simplicity for sure. Well, it's not my favorite color here for sure, but this one here, this one, Tiguan or Tiguan Allspace, it's actually the same, you know. From the rear it's really the same. It's more about that you can see some difference in the side profile. And then the most luxurious design, once more with a more horizontally drawn tail lamps, is also, you can see a little bit more work has been done with those tail lamps. Then again, the rest is a little bit rounder. So the other SUVs are a little bit more angular. The Touareg still gets a rather round design. So which one is now your design favorite here as we are finishing up our design overview? And now let's take on the interiors, front and rear, and see how much room I have there. If you're not Autogefuehl subscriber yet, I'm 1.86 m or 6'1" in height. Let's see how that one plays out. Starting with the T-Cross. Just a first look at the interior. Hard plastic at the inside of the doors, but a lot of room here for the bottles. So this one's surely the easiest or the most simple one from the materials we use, but it has the cool steering wheel, you know? It has this more angular look at the steering wheel. We'll soon also get to some extensive cockpit perspective, but just here, look at the side. And interesting seats, they remind me of the one that are available in the Tiguan with this, let's say, triangle structure inside. Very beautiful, done with a fabric and leather red mix. So a great material mix there as for the seats. And you see the seats look very much SUV alike. So, and well, it sits 4 centimeters higher than a Polo from the chassis, but seating position is more than 10 centimeters higher than in a Volkswagen Polo. So indeed, you do not feel as you would be sitting in a small vehicle. It really feels SUV-ish. It's not only feeling crossover-ish. You really sit very high, so you have a more grown-up feeling than the car is actually suggesting as for the length. But that's the same for the design on the exterior. It's really small. But the exterior also suggests it's somehow proper SUV, and the interior seating position indeed too. So it's very comfortable. And if you compare it also to the Seat Arona, for example, this is here more comfortable, I think, because of those seats. Maybe those are really the seats of the Tiguan. Very interesting. So I would definitely recommend you to exactly go for those seats. They have some shoulder and thigh support. They are really great. So extremely comfortable considering it's a small car. And I have to say, when I drive the normal small cars with my size, I sometimes have problems like with lower back pain and something, but as you have this upright seating position here, there's actually no problem. Also a good overview, and as for the height, well, I can pump the seat. Yeah, I just had in one pump up, and this still leaves headroom here. So even for very tall people, it's actually no problem. And also the area you can move around here, that's a very good result. Do we still have rear legroom? This is of course the question when I would be driving in the front. And yes, indeed that works. Of course the bench is here now all the way in the rear, but I do not even hit the seat with my knees. I can still put a hand in front of my knees. That is great usage of the whole package. So the exterior length to the interior size is great. And I can even put a hand over my head. That's really cool. Can I vary the... Yeah, actually yes. Or? No. So I can just flip the seat here. I cannot vary the angle. Maybe a little bit. So this is all the way back. Yeah. A little bit like this, like a small angle. I can vary the, I can vary the rear area here, the rear part, just a little bit. But I mean, it's a very comfortable seating, also with the same seat design here at the rear. I have to say I'm pretty impressed here with the T-Cross. Now the T-Roc, which is actually the Golf SUV. Why did people think this is the Polo SUV? Why? They are using some of the interior stuff of the Polo, that's why. It's also hard material here on the inside of the doors, so they saved money right there. The red cover here, also some space at the inside of the doors. This was the optional animal skin equipment, but also for the T-Roc you have really good fabric seating choices. And of course the orange color, well, you have to like it, of course. The steering wheel is the one from the Golf. There, for example, you can see is a Golf, but they have mixed some Golf stuff with new Polo interior. And well, since they use a lot or more of the Polo interior, people thought this one is the Polo SUV, whereas technology-wise, chassis-wise, it's a Golf SUV. Very interesting always, Hard pack, by the way, also at the top dashboard. Well, when you get inside, surprise! Well, this one is rather a crossover. You sit lower than in the smaller T-Cross. It's still a good seating position. You feel also a little bit higher than in the Golf. Headroom, well, we got the panoramic roof here. Put the seat in lowest position. I still got some headroom. If you leave out the panoramic roof, then you would have a little bit more headroom. The one difference, of course, the T-Cross does not have a panoramic roof. They don't offer that, neither in the Arona. Only if you go then for the Seat Ateca or here with the T-Roc, then you can also opt for a panoramic roof. Tell you a secret. I'm not naming the dealer, but one dealer told me once, like with Seat, if we had a panoramic roof with the Arona, no one would buy the Ateca anymore. Well, maybe it's not that quiet, because Ateca is also a good car and has some reason to buy it, for sure. But if you think about if we had the T-Cross with a panoramic roof, then probably one reason less to go for the T-Roc then. But if you rather prefer this crossover style for a car and don't want this very high SUV, then maybe the T-Roc is the one for you. It's still comfortable to sit in here and you feel cozy and you feel somewhat at home, especially if you're used to other Volkswagen Group vehicles. But the T-Cross to me is a little more comfortable, and since I also like this higher seating position. Now what about the rear bench? Well, first of all, look inside. As for the styling, and now let me test that. Here we cannot vary the bench and I have less legroom. See, and this is the reason, because when you not sit so upright, you also waste space. So here I hit my knees at the rear. I mean, I could slide it maybe a little bit forward, but and also when I have the panoramic roof here, I hit my head at the ceiling just a little bit. That would be a little bit better again if we don't have the panoramic roof. But you have to say, the package in the T-Cross, although it's shorter, is way better than the T-Roc. You can still do a lot with this vehicle. It's still a handy vehicle here, the T-Roc. But in this case, the T-Roc, the T-Cross is the rear winner. A little bit different, difficult, you know, without like T something. T-Cross, T-Roc, Tiguan, Touareg. So now the Tiguan, and here we already have some soft materials on the top part of the door. This is rather the Passat SUV, you know, mid-size SUV, at least in Europe. Fabric inserts, space for bottles. And you can see from the interior it's somehow more classy, more elegant. By the way, this one here is the off-road version. You can also see it here at the interior, the one with the bigger approaching angle on the outside, underfloor cover on the lower part, and only available with all-wheel drive, just some special edition. And look at those lovely seats. I mean, I think go for the seats we also have in the T-Cross. We've shown you those with the Tiguan in where I also had the blue car. In a review, I can also link that one, that also had this structure on the inside with fabric leatherette mix. Here, this one here is microfiber on the inside and fabric on the outside. Is also great, depending on if you rather prefer fabric or microfiber. The fabric even stays a little bit cooler than the microfiber in summer. But still, of course, the climate features are always better than with animal skin. The steering wheel, again, the same one as in the T-Roc or in the Golf. And analog instruments here, but you can also have digital ones for all those SUVs here now. So they all start with analog instruments, but you can always opt then for digital instruments. Now let's get inside, and here you definitely feel that you are in another segment. So this is here grown up, definitely. You know, you have the high seating position, higher than in anything else we've been sitting in before. This is really relaxing, very cozy. The car itself sits higher and you feel you have just more car around you. This one is not a real compact car anymore. So if you have problems with parking spaces and so on, then again also smaller ones could be handier. Still, the Tiguan is somewhat a good compromise between all of the different features a car might offer, because you can still do so much with this vehicle, although it's not too long, but it offers you a great comfort. With this car already, I would say I would go like also on long road trips and stuff. Well, with the T-Cross, maybe with those good seats, we really have to test it on a long-term test. I really would be interested in a long-term test of the T-Cross and going like a long motorway run and see how that one plays out with the comfort there. But here, I mean, to me, the Tiguan here in the short bay variant is one of the best cars at the moment, which when you think about, you know, like overall generalist cars. And it's really great seating position here. I just love it. Here also, by the way, soft touch at the dashboard. That's also different. So they did not save money with materials here. And headroom, there's no panoramic roof inbuilt in this very test vehicle. Still plenty of headroom left, but it would even work still with the panoramic roof. Now, if we go to the rear, also with the Alcantara inserts here on the inside part, Everything is rather, you can see, rectangular, so also rear passengers can sit very well. And you have some more options to vary those seats. So there's still room in front of the knees. I would never go for those plastic tables. I think they're just a little bit weird. I mean, they're maybe handy for the kids. They have also been improved in this generation if you compare it to the previous Tiguan generation. Yeah, I mean, it does the job for sure. I think it's a little bit annoying as for the knee room here. Otherwise, you would have more knee room right there, and headroom also plenty left. And important for me here is that I can also, like in the T-Cross, vary the rear bench, and I have this strap here, and then I can finally adjust the angle I want to be seated, like more upright, or when I'm relaxed, more sleeping position, I can put it a little bit more back. So this is definitely good. And then you also have some other amenities here. I'll just get out of the vehicle and that Jonas can show you that. Thanks, by the way, Jonas, today for being here out in the cold for a long time comparison. So you have some USB supply and also some rear climate support there in the middle lower tunnel. So please, some thumbs ups also and comments for Jonas. A lot of work here to be done here with the big SUV comparison test, and especially like towards 0 degrees. We are doing that all for you guys. And not only all for you, but also Allspace with the Tiguan Allspace here in my not favorite color. Which one of you guys would buy it in this color? Please tell me. Here, by the way, different interior styling. This is also called lovely. I like bright interiors because even if it's a dark day, not so much sunlight, you have a bright interior, it's just light. And this one also with the Alcantara on the inside, beautiful. So the Tiguan offers really beautiful seating choices. I like that. In the front, it's totally the same. Tiguan and Tiguan Allspace, or Europe and European and US Tiguan. Here we have the panoramic roof too. So there you can see also the difference. So it leaves a little bit less headroom than we would have without the panoramic roof. But as I told you, it still works. This is the living proof. I can even put the seat a little bit lower if I want so. And again, a good seating position. Now it gets really exciting because how much more room do US customers have in the rear? Or if you compare then normal Tiguan to the Tiguan Allspace, you already see it, of course, that you have more legroom. So it's not only more trunk space, but also more legroom. Also with the nice bright Alcantara interior there. Here we go. And that's, of course, plenty, you know. Especially when I put this table up. Plenty of legroom left. So the Tiguan Allspace offers more legroom and more trunk capacity. And if you think about this car here, the relation between exterior dimensions and the space you have on the interior, this is really good. So there are some like upper mid-size segment vehicles or upper segment vehicles, also from the premium manufacturers, which have, you know, which are even like 30 centimeters longer than this one here and have less legroom. So the package they present us here is also pretty nice. And again, of course, with adjusting the seat here. And well, if you have the 6 and 7 seat, then it might come handy if you slide this one here forward. And then you can, you know, go in the rear a little bit easier and also have some legroom in the rear left. If I remember it correctly, Jonas and I were in Detroit 2 years ago, and we had some very nice ladies right there at the motor show, and they tested for us also how to get as many people as possible in that trunk. Maybe we find some of this footage. That this was really nice, I can tell you. You guys also liked it, I know you very well. So good result here from the Tiguan. Now what about the Touareg, the big luxury pack? This one is of course something completely different as for the interior. More sensual, more, you know, luxurious, soft touch. Then we have this wood insert here. You can also get aluminum, more playing around with ambient lighting, for example. Then there's even entry in the vehicle. A lot of animal skin use here, of course. There are also fabric base options in Germany at least, but not on all markets. So this one also with a lot of elements, more old school approach for sure. But it does have the same steering wheel, and when I pay double the price, maybe I also want to have something different as a steering wheel. Or what do you guys think? But the big question is, of course, if we go bigger on the exterior. There you can also see those new dashboard layout. You can also go with smaller screens if you like. This one here, the more complex screen, and it basically forms one dissolving unit. Here, the top spec as for the infotainment system. The Volkswagen test vehicles are never shown with the base infotainment system for the Touareg. Of course, they want to show what they got. So when we get inside here, for example, there's this electric function. It won't only work when I close the door, that the seat automatically goes forward then and goes backward again when you open the door. So that's a good luxury function for sure. Here I'm just doing it manually electric now. You got that? So when I sit here now, you don't have this clearest overview as you would have in the other SUV. You sit high, sit upright, command driving position. One of the most comfortable cars for sure in the industry, especially if you have the optional air suspension. Then still here, like with the Mercedes GLE, you have this carpet style ride still with a soft air suspension. Not as the other SUVs that are more tuned in a sporty way. I could, for example, talk about the Audi Q8 we also have here on location. But you can see a separate... I knew Jonas would do that. But you can see a separate review of the Audi Q8 here in Autogefuehl, of course, as well. With AJ and with me both, we have both videos. So back to the Touareg here. White contrast stitches at the top dashboard. And yeah, the overview is somewhat limited. Also, if you compare it to the Tiguan, yes, it's a bigger car, but also, you know, the whole console here, the top dashboard and the middle console is more voluminous, whereas especially in the Tiguan it's more open, it's built freely, you can move around, and this one is more a classic style where you're maybe like a little bit caged in as a driver. That is again a matter of preference, what you like best, but definitely very comfortable. Headroom wise, there's plenty of headroom left, and also when we have the panoramic roof, still no problem. We had a couple of Touaregs with a panoramic roof too, so you don't have to be afraid of that. It's actually interesting. So all of the SUVs don't have any problem with a headroom, but of course, since the SUVs are higher in the building style, that's usually not such a big problem. The rear bench here, again, also with a luxurious style, again, but in the old school definition rather, also with a if you like, 4-zone AC unit in the middle tunnel right there. So you can adjust there actually quite a lot. And now the question is, you're paying double the price than for the Tiguan. The car's also a little bit longer, but it has less rear legroom. And of course, if you compare it to the Tiguan Allspace, yes, definitely. But even the normal Tiguan, if I remember correctly now, maybe you scroll back in the timecode, or maybe I just test it now again. I really want to know it this time. So this amount of rear legroom here is still left for me. I can also vary this rear bench, of course, if I want more trunk, and I can also change the angle of the back part here. In this case, it's not a strap; it's a separate lever here in the lower part. There it is. This one here to flip the seats, or also to vary the rear part of this rear seating bench. Yeah, at one point I can remember that it's vary and not vary. Sorry. Not a native speaker, but I hope you're actually okay with my English. So this one here in the normal Touareg. Now I want to know what's in the normal Tiguan, like in the short wheelbase Tiguan. I always say normal Tiguan because it's normal for us Europeans. Of course, a normal Tiguan in the US would be the Allspace. That table, huh? Yeah, it's comparable. Maybe a little bit better here in the Tiguan, maybe a little bit, but you can. It's almost the same, and maybe if there's a difference, then maybe in favor a little bit of the Tiguan. So we can definitely remember the short wheelbase Tiguan has the same legroom as the Touareg, and I mean the overall length difference. This one is about What was like Touareg is almost 5 meters, and this one is more like 440 in this area. So that's like a massive length difference. And we've also seen that the trunk length is also not really. So definitely the Touareg is not the best package. It's more voluminous area you can see around exterior and interior. Tiguan is actually a very good package. So package-wise, my favorites are definitely the Tiguan Allspace and the smallest one, the T-Cross. Which one is your favorite as for the interior so far? Let's also take a look at the front cockpits. Cockpit overview, you can see here those angular shapes right there, then different decor elements are available, but here again all hard pack materials. Still it looks quite good. And my favorite steering wheel, also with this new angular look right there, looks like a design line on the exterior. I think that's like like those rear windows, like the rear window frames at the SUVs. So this the most modern look in this case. Then you start with analog instruments, but those ones here are the 8.3-inch digital instruments. And on the right side, you start with a 6.5-inch screen. This one here is the optional 8-inch screen. So this one then the optional digital setup right there. And well, the infotainment system you still see have volume knob and also this fixed knob that you can zoom in and out, for example. That's pretty helpful that you don't have to do everything just by touch. Of course, most is done by touch, but the good thing is that the menu, the software itself, is actually quite self-explanatory. And in the lower part, you still have separate climate knobs. So everything is very solidly built and it's just easy to use. 2 USB supplies in the lower part, and you can also get an inductive charging pad right there for your smartphone. And a new shifting lever here, DSG shifting lever, of course. The small engines will also come with manual hand drive, optional then the DSG. Now to the T-Roc. We basically have the same setup here as for the infotainment. Again, those are also the optional ones. And this smaller building platform here from the MQB A0 platform, which is also the Polo is using from the interior stuff. One disadvantage is you can either have the map in the digital instruments. I mean, it's of course cool to have that here already. They can also zoom in and out and at the steering wheel, for example. This is the advantage of digital instruments, that you can have the map view in there. But it does not work that it's at the same time also on the big infotainment screen. So you have to then switch it around that you have it here. That will be different in the Tiguan, for example, and also the Golf is able to do that. The climate unit here is definitely Golf style. So in the T-Cross it's a little bit smaller, but the functionality is basically the same. Heated steering wheel is available here too, by the way. It's connected with the heated seats. Then you can go to the menu again and then deactivate one or the other by that. And in the lower part again, this is a classic DSG shifting lever. This one is also available as a manual. Inductive charging box for your phone, USB supplies, and all of those cars are meanwhile also Apple CarPlay and Android Auto functionality available. So, but you have to go for the bigger GPS or pick that option. You can also go for a smaller GPS and pick just that option. And in the lower part, here still, well, there are still normal cup holders without an adaptive function, the same as for the T-Cross. And this one here, difference to the T-Cross, is available with the panoramic roof. Here you can also just shade this whole roof with a white cover. Also available in black, of course. If you pick a black ceiling, then you can also open it. And considering it's not the biggest car, the opening here is actually quite wide. So the closest it gets so far with the T-Roc convertible, you know, I've already told you that in Autogefuehl, there will be a true T-Roc convertible very soon. They are not building the Golf convertible anymore, also not in a new generation, but there will be a T-Roc convertible, and really looking forward to that crossover cabriolet combination. That will be very exciting. So yes, the Tiguan here is somehow a different segment. Everything looks a little bit, you know, more premium for sure. This is a premium vehicle, no doubt. And there's an additional cubby hole here in the top part, and then soft materials everywhere. This one is the biggest screen that is available, also different size that are optionally here. Well, the 9.2 here, it does not have any buttons. It of course looks cleanest, especially when it's clean, not like this at the moment. It has the big GPS screen. It looks pretty cool. It's also fast enough. But the smaller one also has the separate knob still, as we've seen earlier with the T-Roc and the T-Cross, so that might also be a reason maybe not to go for the highest spec. This one here, by the way, also has this gesture control, if you, for example, here in the menu. This car here on the other side has still analog gauges. This is the base, basically, with a small screen in the middle. It looks absolutely fine, but you can also get the all digital instruments for the Tiguan, and then you can also have the map at both sides at the same time. The steering wheel is not really spectacular, but also looks still good. It's the standard one we know, basically. And if you look at the whole cockpit setup here, they use a little bit more design lines, but at the same time, they're rather conservative, whereas T-Cross and T-Roc are more playful. You can also get a lot of colorful choices. This one here, rather everything subtle. In the lower part, then again, heated steering wheel, heated seats, and also the climate unit. Next to, again, 2 USB supplies with inductive charging pad if you go for that option. And interesting is that in this lower part, you also have a driving select for the DCC. The T-Cross does not have a dynamic chassis control, but the T-Roc is the first one. Now also the Tiguan, they both have this adaptive suspension option if you want to go for that one. And here we also have some interesting adaptive cup holders. This is also the difference then to the T-Roc. So yes, you feel the difference here to the T-Roc. You feel definitely more premium in the Tiguan. That would be one of the key choices, key arguments to spend a little bit more money than for this segment. Just hopping shortly to the Tiguan Allspace, you can see the top part is the same. The optional DIN audio system we have in here, it's really good. We had that in the Tiguan R-Line once. It's a great sound system. I was really surprised. Then you can see the upper part is still dark. There's no reflections then in the windscreen, but the lower part, I think, is a good split. We have some bright materials then, and I really like this bright setup they've taken in here. It doesn't have to do anything with the Allspace. It's really just which trim you go for. Also with those digital instruments. You can see this is a big screen then here. Again, it has nothing to do with the Allspace or short wheelbase difference. It's just an option. And here, just as a proof again, here you can have the map on both of those screens at the same time. And it's a great resolution again. See here, even the Autostadt. This is here those towers here where people, where the cars are stored that are being collected then here, the new cars, the different brand pavilions. Yeah, I mean, they for sure need to have visualization of their own compound here. And this one here is where they produce their own electricity for the big plants, which are basically then behind it. So it's, I mean, this is closed for public. The Autostadt area here, this is open for public. You can also check our fan meeting episode we held here once. It was a great event to see some more of the surrounding here. This one here, the Touareg interior, the most central one, the most spectacular one. Very nice also with the LED ambient light, the integration, then the matte wood, which feels really good. It starts with analog instruments here on the left, then optional, you can get those 12-inch screen. And on the right, you would start with a 9.2-inch screen, like we've seen on the Tiguan. And this one is the optional 15-inch screen, and then it goes through like it would be one unit. However, this software here is also a little bit complicated if you need to find some stuff. It looks amazing for sure. But for example, also the climate unit is then just controlled here. So sometimes I think I would like to see a Touareg once of the new generation with just the normal or smaller screen, because it might just be easier to use. This one here very complex, and I mean, it looks super impressive, especially with a satellite view. That's where we are at the moment. But then again, is it maybe too much? Is it over-engineered? What do you guys think? The digital instruments look also pretty cool. You can have this full map view, but you can also change your view. For example, see those classic digital gauges then a little bit better, or then have the big map view once more. The steering wheel is basically the same, but you can see you have this contrast silver inlet right there. Looks also quite very nice. And also this big middle console here then on the side. This is definitely different to the others. This is way more voluminous with the shifting lever in the front. Also, you have one USB supply, inductive charging, and here also some adaptive cup holders. And of course, big difference that you have the air suspension optional, and then you can also adjust it here with the height, especially for off-road driving. Please check out our off-road ride with the Touareg in Morocco we did recently. That was a great trip. And of course, you also have the rear axle steering for this new generation. This is also one thing that differentiates here the Touareg to one of the smaller siblings. Luxury problems today. I have so many keys, I can't even properly hold them. Which one would you go for? So, and why don't we play around with that a little bit? And now we go for the trunks. Ta-da! It's like an orchestra, right? Oh, too bad. The T-Cross does not have an electric hatch. Gotta go there. And now, fight! The trunk dimensions. So we begin with the T-Cross, the smallest one, with the manual hatch, but sometimes the manual hatch is also quite nice because you can, when you stuff things in, you can easily then gently squeeze it through. So with the dimensions here in length, it starts with 64 centimeters. And the interesting thing here is this car is really flexible. So you can move this whole bench, and then you are at 79 centimeters. You can also fit a replacement tire. It's not one here at the moment, but surely enough room for that. So when we move it back, we can also push the bench forward here, flip it like this. So I have the driver's seat as I would be driving. That then would be 1.43 meters. I love that when vehicles are able to do that. So you can put the co-driver's seat all flat, and then it's over 2 meters to the front glove box. Actually, it's 2.35 meters from here to the front glove box. So this is a great result and shows that the smallest vehicle here in the lineup is one of the most versatile ones. Very interesting. So we remember again, the basic trunk length here when you have everything up was 63 centimeters. What about the T-Roc? Here we are at 77 centimeters. So the trunk is indeed a little bit longer. But then again, I mean, it's really hard to remember all those figures, for sure, you know, but I want to push the bench forward again, just once more, and have the direct comparison again. So the T-Roc here, 77 centimeters. And here with the bench forward, it's 78 centimeters. So it's basically the same. So you basically, with this moving bench in the T-Cross, you can make the T-Cross a T-Roc trunk. That's really interesting, isn't it? Below here, we can also fit a replacement tire. That's possible too. And you can see that T-Roc here is somewhat flat around this area. So it is actually not that high, especially here. This is just 35 centimeters. But then here, the standard height is about 40 centimeters. Just telling you where it is in this T-Cross, it's even higher. It's 44 right here. So even the trunk is a little bit higher in the T-Cross. Very interesting. So then, what's the total length then here? This is of course the 2 meters, and then to the front glove box, it's 2 meters 35. So approximately the same as in the T-Cross. So very interesting, and those things you only find out when you really do a head-to-head comparison again, of course, with our great old school measuring stick. Very interesting. You've probably also noticed that we have the leader figures down there for you below, as you know, just at the text figure, so you can also compare those. Now, this one here is the standard short wheelbase Tiguan. So again, just to remember, T-Roc was 77 centimeters. Now, with the Tiguan, the length is 84 centimeters. So you go basically in 10 centimeter differences in the trunk length. So the trunk goes longer and longer and longer. If you ever thought about Seat Ateca, by the way, versus Volkswagen Tiguan, yeah, one of the differences is that in the Tiguan, you can, like in the T-Cross, also move the front, also move the rear bench forward. And here also in a split way. You can see, you can leave that one as this, but for example, just move that one here. And then we're almost at 1 meter in length. And this is then, you know, becoming dimensions of, you know, of a compact or mid-size estate already, like a combi car. There we go. So what about the front seat now? I mean, it depends also. If you have an electric seat, it won't move flat. So this is also a reason to leave it with the manual seats. And even here it's possible, but we already had some Tiguan versions where there was the electric seat and then you could not put it forward. But here then, if you move it all the way up to the front glove box, okay, that's the difference now to the ones before. And now we're here at almost 2 meters and 60 in length. And that is definitely surfboard suitable. And you know, I've been transporting, for example, also a mountain bike in the Tiguan, of course with removed front wheel, and that's actually no problem. It also does work somewhat with the T-Roc, but here of course you're more flexible. It's, you know, just easier to do the stuff. By the way, what I forgot, one main difference is I was flipping the rear bench from the rear compartment here so far. So now it gets really interesting, because if you think about, that's of course just a European choice, like Tiguan versus Tiguan Allspace. In the US you will always have the length of the Allspace, but here the inside trunk was just over 80 centimeters. Now we go to the Tiguan Allspace. Let's see how that one plays out. And that is 1 meter. So it's the result we would have with the normal Tiguan with the bench forward. Isn't that interesting? I mean, who would know? Who would have known that? So if you compare T-Cross versus T-Roc, the trunk length of the T-Roc is the trunk length of the T-Cross when you push the bench forward, and the trunk length of the Tiguan Allspace is the trunk length of the normal Tiguan, of the short wheelbase Tiguan, when you push the bench forward. That must have some concept, but we have now discovered it. You cannot hide it from us anymore, Volkswagen engineers. So that's here 1 meter in length. You can also flip the trunk from here. Let's do it right now. Oh, this one needed a little bit more power. And see, sometimes you have this, you know, the feeling it depends from vehicle to vehicle if it flips completely without or with pushing. I would suppose it's 1 meter 20, right? That would make sense. And it is 1 meter 20. And the total length then of the Tiguan Allspace, or the US Tiguan on the inside, from the back all the way to the glove box. You can hardly measure that. It's really interesting. So that's then 2 meters and 80. That's of course something. Oh, that very bright interior. That's pretty cool, right? So yeah, you would go for the Tiguan Allspace if you just need a little bit more room, a little bit more space. This one here, also the 5-seater variant, the Tiguan Allspace or US Tiguan, you can get it as a 5-seater or alternatively as a 7-seater, but I'm not sure if the 7-seater makes too much sense because remember the Skoda Kodiaq and the Seat Tarraco and also this one Tiguan Allspace. If you have the 7-seater variant, it does not have ISOFIX at the 6 and 7 seats, so it only the additional seats, they only make sense if you are, let's say, not a very small child, so you would need like a separate car seat anyway, and if you're big enough as a child, then it's already too narrow in the 6 and 7 seat, which would be like here in this area then to flip up and down again. So there's a very narrow gap for, let's say, middle-old children who would be able to sit then in a rear, or maybe just, for some situations. I rather would stick with a 5-seat setup and then just have, longer trunk. Now we go to the Touareg. And this one here is also about 1 meter in length. So you can see with the Allspace, you can already have the room you have in the Touareg. That's very interesting. And also move the seat here. That again gains you, well, not quite 20 centimeters, almost 115 in meters. We have the electric setup here for the front passenger seat, and so we cannot really test it. I mean, I could move this seat here all the way in the front. Yeah, just a little bit over 2 meters. So definitely the Tiguan Allspace here from the vehicles we have here is the winner. But of course there is still the Volkswagen Atlas. And if you take a look at the room you have inside there with the trunk, also with the rear passengers and so on, that makes sense. And the Volkswagen Atlas is of course the best price performance deal as for the price you pay and the room you get on the inside. And there, since you have the 6 and 7 seats there, they make really sense because even adults can sit there in the 6th and the 7th seats. I have also tested that too already. Also, they have thought about the ISOFIX at the 6th and 7th seats, so if you just want to use those for child seats, it's even easier than with the Volkswagen Atlas. So if you think about the trunk comparison here, versatility. Actually, you have to say in Europe you have to go for the T-Cross because considering the length gives you the best versatility, and if you are in the US you should probably go, you don't have problems with so narrow streets besides some New England areas or something, then actually in US the Atlas makes most sense if you think about the price you pay and the room you get. So the special thing with the engines for the T-Cross is it's the only of this lineup here having a 3-cylinder engine, 1 liter turbo petrol engine. Then there's also a 1.5 liter 4-cylinder petrol engine, all turbos, and a 1.6 liter diesel. Whereas we go for the T-Roc, this one is then the 2 liter TDI instead of the 1.6. Also listen to the sound. Just turn it on, they can check the sound. We will compare it to the petrol engine very soon. And this one here also got the 1.5 liter petrol, also the 2 liter TSI, the 2 liter turbo petrol engine. And it's basically the same then for the Tiguan. This one, by the way, petrol engine sound. See how it's different then. This one of the older specs here. Nowadays, most Tiguans go out there with the 1.5 liter petrol engine as well. They also offer the 2 liter petrol engine, as well as a 2 liter diesel, the TDI, as the main engine, especially in Europe. And of course the same then for the Allspace. This one here is in the 1.5 liter petrol engine. You can see there also has this newer engine cover. So T-Cross, a little bit different because it also features the 3-cylinder, smaller engines. T-Roc and Tiguan, basically almost the same engine setup. Now again, it's different with the Touareg because this one here, the V6 TDI, is one of the main engines, and of course the V6 TSI, both 3 liter of displacement, 6-cylinder. You can also get especially more for the Chinese market 2-liter TSI for that one, and soon to be having also a plug-in hybrid is announced, as well as a V8 TDI. Well, and then there's the Atlas, and that one again has some different engine setup. There's a 2-liter TSI, and special for that one, a 3.6-liter naturally aspirated petrol engine. So you can see a lot of the cars have a lot in common, but there are also some differences as for engines and technology. And one more thing I want to mention about the all-wheel drive. The Touareg has still this real permanent off-road all-wheel drive, the standard one, you know, the old school stuff. Whereas all of the other cars, the T-Cross does not have all-wheel drive at all. But then Tiguan and the T-Roc and also the Atlas have the Haldex clutch, so they're predominantly front-wheel drive, and then if they are in the all-wheel drive version, also torque is being transported to the rear wheels. That is supposed to save some fuel. Of course, if you're more interested in off-road stuff, then you would stick with the old school off-road setup. But we also had the Tiguan already in an off-road course and scored quite well there too. So for most off-road use, it will still be enough. Of course, if you want to go hardcore off-road, a permanent all-wheel drive will do better. And of course, with the air suspension, you can lift the car higher. And talking about air suspension, indeed, this is also one thing that differentiates the Touareg from the others in technology aspects, because this one here you can get with air suspension, all the other SUVs from the Volkswagen here not. Well, that's as close as it gets for driving the T-Cross here today, because the driving of this vehicle is still under embargo. So we want to be fair also towards other journalists and cannot actually show the driving today. But first of all, Brian has already driven this car as a prototype vehicle, so you should check out this video then. We will also link it below, then Brian can tell you something more about driving this vehicle. And it is a sibling here of the Seat Arona, and we have of course driven that one. And I'm also sitting here and basically feeling something of the car already, and so I can also combine Brian's stuff, the Arona experience, and also the seating here together with that. So as the seats are better than with the Arona, it makes a more comfortable impression overall. It is still a small car, it has a short wheelbase, so it will be quite agile to steer it around. You somehow get the feeling, at least you get in the Arona, you're still driving a small vehicle, but due to the higher seating position, it's a little bit more elaborate, so to say, and a little bit more comfortable than the normal of the small cars. And since this one here has also this SUV focus, it feels a little bit, it feels bigger while driving, but in a good way, but it's not big on the exterior at the same time. You still have upright windows and so on, so you still have a good overview when parking in and out. That's of course another important aspect. And well, the DSG, we know this shifting concept already, so you have rather smooth shifting transitions. And the steering feel in the Volkswagen cars is usually very direct, so precise and direct. You don't have to steer that much, and it's rather progressive. So from all we have experienced so far, we can really say that this one will probably be a very positive driving impression. Of course, as soon as we can do the great full driving review with the series production model, we will update that and also link that below with this video, because this big comparison video will surely be online, for the next couple years if you watch that one already at a later stage. And now to driving the T-Roc. Well, you already feel from the driving position, it is somewhat a little bit bigger. Just testing now the PDC, the Tiguan behind us. Well, and you sit lower, of course, than in the T-Cross, as I told you earlier. So this is the thing, So the T-Cross is smaller a little bit. but when you sit in the front, it feels somewhat a little bit bigger. However, this one here, it really feels more Golf-alike because it is essentially a Golf. And maybe I would say it's maybe also a little bit more silent, but we have to test that maybe as a higher speed comparison. This one here, by the way, is just a small course where this is, first of all, this is a parking lot just to show you, and people catch their cars here, and then they can also go on a small turn here. So they can actually go right here, and then, for example, see if the traffic sign recognition works, like here. You can see it then on the map. On the left side, it also showed me the 10. There it is, 10 when it's wet. So that works. So really interesting what they've built here, and it's just that you can learn your car just a little bit. Then you go also up a hill, can accelerate just a little bit. And what the T-Roc is offering you is that it's actually giving you a very neutral driving feeling. So the T-Cross will be tilting to the right and the left a little bit more. This one here sits a little bit lower. Wow, that looks really ugly on the windscreen. It's a little bit. Oh, there's another T-Roc in front of us. So here, with the T-Roc, as you sit a little bit lower, you have a little bit more agile driving feeling. So this car will be a little bit sportier than the T-Cross will be in this respect. Again, as I said, more driving alike like a Golf does. But the Golf is a very flawless driver, so that's definitely a good thing. So we're driving the diesel here today. Of course, we've driven different engines with this car already. So if you're more interested in a separate T-Roc review, there's everything you can find on Autogefuehl. The petrol engines are a little bit more spontaneous from the low RPM areas, and the diesels have more torque. So when you're, for example, at the motorway and then accelerate even further, then you have a little bit more power in this respect. The steering here is again very precise and direct, as a lot of the Volkswagen vehicles are offering. That's, I think, very cool. Also, you don't have to steer that much, so you're very well in control. The standard suspension is for some a little bit too stiff. So with the DCC, you can then set, for example, stay in normal driving mode, or then if you have some sportier situations, then you can also go. There's another T-Roc in front of us, basically T-Roc City here now. If you are in a little sportier situation, then you can also go for the sports mode. Let's see here in the normal mode how the steering reacts. A little bit careful now with the pupils. So, and there's an off-road mode, but also here the sport mode. So sport mode, the gears are turned up higher. Maybe here already go in a lower gear. The steering is maybe a little bit stiffer, but overall it's still relatively light. And let's see, just from the suspension, try to let the car tilt now a little bit. This is the sport mode. Then we go to the normal mode. And it tilts a little bit more. It's just a slight notch. So there's not the super big difference between those driving modes, but definitely a slight difference between those. I think the big strength of this vehicle is that it really offers you a rather neutral driving feeling, but again in a very good way. It's a good setup, a good weight distribution. This car leaves you with basically nothing to criticize, because everything is really really fitting to each other. So now we're again also on some gravel here, just for different testing surroundings. Also good to test the suspension. It's still very comfortable. Indeed, for this car I would recommend to go for the DCC. Here also equipped with all-wheel drive. It's not a must-have for that. Going in some bumps here. Still no of those big bumps are transported into your lower back or spine area, so you get, you stay pretty calm with that too. When you drive a little bit faster, also the noise insulation is good. I already experienced that in a full driving test with the T-Roc 2. that is something they can just rely on the technology the Golf is offering, so they are very good in the noise insulation, so you can also drive higher Autobahn speeds and it will still remain pretty silent. And as long as, of course, you have those assistance systems, you're also safe in this respect. There's the adaptive cruise control, for example, and is working pretty flawlessly. So reducing the speed and also in traffic jam situations and so on. That's also, I think ACC is a good option to go for, and also the blind spot monitor you can go for. By the way, this is very interesting. In the T-Cross, the blind spot monitor is now standard equipment. That's unlike as in all other vehicles. And I think it's a very good choice. They put that in that way with the all-new small SUV now. So a good trend. I was demanding that for a couple of years now, that blind spot monitors are put in the cars from standard equipment, because it can really save lives, you know, and the manufacturers earn still enough money. They can afford to put that from standard equipment. Of course, they also want to charge the customers at some point, but the T-Cross will still be a, still be a good bargain. This one here, the T-Roc, is also a good price performance if you go for a rather low spec entry variant. But with this car here, there's the danger that you put a lot of options in it and then it gets really expensive. So that's one thing to look out here for when driving the T-Roc. So you can rely on the qualities of the Volkswagen Golf here from the 7th generation. That's where the T-Roc is profiting from. Therefore, it really gives you a good driving feeling for all different situations you might experience. This is just a very, very good all-round vehicle. So now we move over to the Tiguan, and just when I turn here, I mean, it was a little bit easier to turn the T-Roc for sure. It will be even easier to turn the T-Cross. But what you already feel here at lower speeds, that this car here is more silent. So the noise insulation is indeed noticeably better than in the smaller versions. This is also one of the reasons you would go then for a segment above that. And you sit higher, you have in this case then also a better overview. And when I'm now going a little bit fast here in the corner, you also feel the car wants to push a little bit more to the outside. So it's not that much fun to steer it around as the T-Roc. The T-Roc feels sportier in this respect. However, still, this car is really easy to control and it doesn't feel too heavy. So, but this is definitely about the each individual comparisons here today. That's why we're doing it. Suspension-wise, you feel that you have basically a longer spring travel to work with, so this car can even out a little bit more stuff. It doesn't tilt too much to the sides, so although it's an SUV, you still have good contact to the road, but due to the fact that you sit a little bit higher and it's a little bit more silent in here, I'm somehow a little bit more relaxed, With the T-Roc I thought, oh, that's cool, it's sporty, it's fun, it's as agile as a Golf. Therefore, the T-Roc will also work with a high horsepower spec version. Listen to what I've just told you. And this one here, I mean, yes, it's a little bit bigger, but still, it feels somewhat agile, but not as agile as the T-Roc. So if you're more interested in a crossover sporty driving experience, just a little bit, then you will be happier with the T-Roc. And if you want more this, I always say sovereign. I mean, you cannot really use that word for that, but I just like to use it for that. It's more like a more confident ride and more silent ride, then it would be this one. And the Tiguan for me is also a very good mixture. It's not super large yet. You can do most stuff with it. You also still find parking spots and so on. But it's not as bulky as a full-size SUV, but it already offers you the comfort of a full-size SUV. So I wouldn't necessarily say that I would need a Touareg for the comfort now if I go on a on a long road trip or something. This one here is already definitely long road trip suitable. Now we're going on this little uneven surface, and I'm not sure, Jonas, what do you think? As a co-driver here now, as we
more comfortable.
Yeah, I think we can definitely say that. The T-Roc also evened out the bumps pretty well, but here you again feel that you have more suspension to work with. That's really nice. And by the way, the driving modes here, see also not too much tilting. The steering is also pretty precise. Of course, it's somewhat light to control, but there is no dead area. So even in those areas, I have some resistance, and I feel that there are notable steering commands being transported still. That's something they figured out very well. There's an off-road mode, especially in the off-road version. But if we here, for example, switch between comfort and sport, see here again, the comfort mode. Yeah, the steering is lighter, definitely. The suspension also changes a little bit, but here also there are just some minor changes. I mean, the biggest thing that is happening is that the suspension itself is a little bit more evolved, so to say, and that the shifting is changing. And when you, for example, want to speed up the car a little bit more, you can always use the shifting pedals here and shift down, or then the right pedal and hold it again, and then you're in this automatic driving mode again. Do you have to go for the DCC with the Tiguan? I mean, it's always a nice option for sure, but then again, the base suspension here will also do just fine. The base suspension is also good, and if you want to go for a low-spec Tiguan, this might also be, a thought to go for. Not go for every option you can possibly get. Also with the analog instruments, you can easily live with. I think they are absolutely fine and also very clear to read. So I would also, without hesitation, go for a base spec Tiguan or something, and also go for a lower spec engine. The engine is also very well insulated from the cabin, especially since we're driving the petrol engine here. It's, you could hardly hear it, and that also accounts again for the silent ride. To me, the Tiguan is definitely one of my favorite vehicles out there, because it's again also a good all-rounder. Already of course bigger than the T-Roc, but it gives you so much confidence and calmness already at a price where you can still say more people can afford it than one of the big premium SUVs. I think this one is the strength of the Tiguan. It's maybe not really known as the premium SUV, but it is without doubt is a very good premium SUV already, and a true SUV. And now to the Tiguan Allspace, or that would be the US Tiguan in length as well. There are some specifications which are a little bit different than some minor details, but basically it's the same vehicle. So, and I have a confession to make. I have never driven the Tiguan Allspace yet. AJ and Jonas were doing the driving event of the Allspace. I just, took a couple of looks at the aesthetic premieres each, but not here with driving it. The big question is, does it drive different than the standard short wheelbase Tiguan? When you're going straight? No, of course not. But let's see how it is in the corners, because it is somewhat significantly longer, and when you drive so many vehicles, you also develop a fine feeling for how a car also behaves in detailed situations and so on. So far I don't notice so much difference. Of course it's the same then for the short wheelbase model. You have the great sound insulation. It's definitely one of the best in this SUV segment here. So if you think about other SUVs in this length, it is also basically the same for the Skoda Kodiaq and also for the Seat Tarraco. But sometimes we've experienced that the VW models have a little bit better sound insulation or noise insulation than the Seat models, for example. Maybe it's just, you know, some minor stuff then which is different, which is then resulting in into this stuff. Driving around the Wolfsburg Autostadt is always fun because you see so many different VW models, everyone also with the WOB number plate, and a lot of those are company cars, of course, but also just with, you know, other people living here. This whole city consists of Volkswagen, basically. This is, by the way, here the stadium of the Wolfsburg Soccer Club. So now we're getting to some slalom here. So I feel that the Allspace here is a little bit lazier than the Tiguan, but not on a big note. We also have the DCC mounted here. Comfort mode, soft steering, sport mode. Doesn't change the steering too much, but here the suspension, and when I'm going over some bumps and so on, I get a little bit more feedback on my suspension, but still you can drive this car in the sport mode and still have great comfort. That's also something, because the suspension setup is really great. But sometimes, you know, with those new driving selectors here for the modes, I think it could be done a little bit easier, but a little bit irritating, especially to do it while driving. It was a little bit easier in the past. So now again over this uneven terrain and with the same comfort, I feel a little bit more that I have longer wheelbase. So here, for example, when I'm turning the car, and I mean, in the car you sit at the very front, and then you feel basically the car behind you, the length, and it is somewhat notable, those, you know, this extra space you have then behind you. But it's not that I would say it has a super negative effect on the car. So when let's just say I wake up from a dream and I'm sitting in a Volkswagen Tiguan Allspace, but I don't know it. And you would ask me now, Thomas, are you driving the short wheelbase or the long wheelbase version? Would I really know it? That was a warning that it's now 4 degrees Celsius outside, so that where it might begin to, you know, to have some freezing grounds. I'm not sure if I could really say it. Maybe after a while or in some, you know, certain situations, so on, but they are indeed quite similar. So if you are in a market where you have the choice between short wheelbase and long wheelbase, the decision would rather between, do you have problems to find parking space, or do you need some more room on the interior? Do you have a family where you can use this additional legroom, or do you often travel with taller adults in the rear? That might also be something. Or if you're traveling with kids and so on, do you need some more trunk length when you're going on holiday? Then you have some more storage room and so on. But driving wise, it's actually totally fine. It's almost as agile. The fun is still there, you know. This midsize SUV is still fun to drive, for sure. But again, the T-Roc is more fun to drive. But the overall, you know, this calmness this car is already delivering, that's what I love with this vehicle, you know. You don't spend super much money, like it's not a 100k car. So again, you can get it in entry for 30,000 euros in Germany, for example. A reasonably spec one, maybe towards 40. And then this is all you need. So this would also be a car, you know, even when people say like, oh, I have tons of money, which car should I go for, Thomas? I not necessarily say that buy the most expensive car that is available, because cars like those here can really deliver a lot of things at the same time. I think that's also the reason why this is really one of my favorite vehicles, be it as a short wheelbase or also as a long wheelbase model. So also our friends in the US, you are not missing anything majorly with the short wheelbase model. You should be as happy with the long wheelbase model, and since you get better prices there in the US over anyway, probably you should be even heavier to have this additional room there in the rear. now to the big one. Well, not the biggest one, that will be the Atlas. I'll also tell you something about the Atlas very soon. But here now to the Touareg. Well, with this rear axle steering, it feels a little bit smaller than it actually is. That rear axle steering is one of the best options you can possibly go for with this car. It really helps when parking in and out. Here there's also a true head-up display being projected into the windscreen, whereas for the Tiguan, there's just this, flipped up head-up display with the small plastic screen. Everything feels more voluminous here. You feel a little bit more elaborate, but at the same time you have less overview. You don't feel, let's say, so much connected with the vehicle than you feel with the other ones, especially with the T-Roc, and also of course with the small one, the T-Cross, and still with the Tiguan, you are basically in control all the time. It's not that you are not in control here, but what I want to say is, really hard to describe. Everything is easy to use. Also, like when you're just searching for like where can I activate seat heating or the heated steering wheel and so on. In the other smaller cars, it's more straightforward. Straightforward is the word. And here, everything is a little bit more complicated with those new technology and stuff. You have to learn the car a little bit more, and this is here more being driven by the car. And the others are, I still drive the car myself completely. Of course, I'm, driving the car here too, but I hope you get what I mean with the difference of being the active driver yourself and more being driven. It will be more the case when we have this autonomous driving functions, for sure. But this one here, it gives you a very pleasant experience. It's really silent in here. Noise insulation is again great. At higher speeds, by the way, recently experienced that with the Audi Q8, for example. The Q8 is a little bit better at really higher speeds than the Touareg. But then this one here has the air suspension a little bit tuned softer. And I would also expect from air suspension vehicles like the Mercedes GLE is doing that too, that you feel this carpet ride from the air suspension, and this is really cool, So great comfort, super comfortable seating position. This little bit more caged-in feeling can also be cozy. It really depends, The Tiguan gives you more light on the interior, it's more open. This one here then feels also cozier while driving. So you can argue for and against it for sure, but this air suspension gives, of course, a little bit more suspension comfort, even more. And you're feeling that you are in this ship, the ship that is sailing on the road ocean. Off-road, the Touareg is of course beaten by nothing else, especially when you pump up the air suspension. Here you hardly feel what's underneath, so that's no problem at all for the air suspension. And then of course check out our off-road episode here with the Touareg. We have 2 off-road episodes already, by the way, with this one here with the with this generation. And big difference is here you can also get the 3-liter V6 engines, and they give you a lot of confidence too. The car is heavier, so the smaller ones don't really need those big engines. But here, it is somewhat definitely a different driving feeling with that. It's not that the other ones are underpowered, but some still appreciate a driving feeling of those 6 cylinders if you compare it to 4 cylinders, maybe also sound-wise and so on. And that you can also easily drive them with lower RPMs. Although we have the air suspension, the car is not tilting too much to the sides, so it is surprisingly sporty also with this rear axle steering. But again, there are also full-size SUVs which are also set on the sportier note. If I compare it now directly, the Mercedes GLE is actually the softest as for the air suspension setup. Then maybe this one here comes, and then an Audi Q8 or the BMW X5, and also the Porsche Cayenne are rather set on a sporty, stiff tone. And I'm not sure if it's a good direction that they make the SUVs sportier and sportier and sportier. Yeah, it's also about driving fun, and this car is still fun to drive. So it's not one of those very huge cars where you say you have just comfort but no driving fun at all. But for sure, this is more a car where you enjoy the silence again and the elaborate driving experience with the big air suspension and so on. Still, they figured a good steering setup. See here, I don't have to steer too much, and I still have a good feeling. The steering feel is somewhat similar with all of the models we've driven here today. It's more that, you know, size and so on, and suspension is always a little bit different. So, what do you think is of our driving impressions? We cannot drive the Atlas here today because there's no registration license plate for it here. But we've driven it already, and so I can tell you something more about that. And of course, I really recommend you guys to watch those single episodes we have about all of those SUVs. We all have the driving reviews. T-Cross, of course, soon if you're watching this video after it has been just released. But if you're more interested, tune into the single reviews, and then we have even more situations like higher speeds and also other turns and testing more of the assistance systems and so on. This is also very interesting. So a lot more content you can enjoy here on Autogefuehl. Now let me tell you something about the Volkswagen Atlas and how it drives. Well, it is still based on the MQB platform. This one here is the MLB. I'm sitting in a Touareg still. The MLB, this is the longitudinal build platform at Volkswagen AG. So they have also the bigger engines in there, the V6, which are just longitudinal mounted in the engine bay. All the other cars, MQB, with a transverse mount with the engine, so they're like this. So the hoods are actually shorter. So the Atlas is still the MQB, and therefore also a little bit cheaper than the MLB platform. But the Atlas is a little bit longer still than the Touareg, as we explained to you earlier. Driving-wise, you can check out the Brian's episode for more driving talk about that. But just in short, it is not super much powered. Of course, it's bigger, so it's, let's say, the laziest ones of all the SUVs they have as for the acceleration. But it also doesn't need to be, because it's a big one. You travel maybe with a lot of people, and it's also primarily set for the US-American market, where we have less, the speed limits are actually different than in Germany. So in Germany you have more high-speed driving, where you maybe need a little bit more punch or also more agility, and they rather want to say, yeah, you know, American market, with a big vehicle you maybe don't drive so fast, but it needs to be more comfortable and so on. And so they don't offer the most powerful engines for this vehicle. Also they want to keep the price low, and therefore don't offer the super power engines and so on. But of course they are the only choice with the naturally aspirated engine. I would really love to drive that one myself at one point for sure. Brian also told us that the noise insulation was good there too. And it was surprisingly agile still as for the size. But of course, in the Touareg we have the optional rear axis steering that makes it more agile, and the other SUVs, they are smaller by themselves, so they are more agile than the Atlas. The steering wheel setup is somewhat similar. You also again have this direct steering setup that you actually can very well steer, don't have to have so much power. At the same time, it's also somewhat sporty because it has this progressive feeling overall. And so far we only gathered good experiences with the Atlas. It's obviously also selling quite well. And again, it offers so much room on the interior, and we here in Germany are quite envy that you guys in the US get it at a relatively low price. Also, especially if you compare other SUVs which are, way bigger. Of course, it's not set on a super luxury tone as the Touareg here is, but I think that's also the interesting thing, that it's somehow different. I wonder if at some point they will also be offering that in Europe, but again, some roads are here very narrow, so that might not fit then. What do you think about our driving impressions here? I told you initially I want to have your favorite from exterior, interior, and the driving, and then your overall favorite from all of those 6. Do we have 6? 6, right? Together with the others is 6, right? Yeah, from those over 6 SUVs. And even looking forward, if there are some people which are saying like they have different favorites for exterior, interior, driving and overall, or if there are more people who say like, I have one favorite for all, overall and both of the individual stuff. Really looking forward to your comments then, because that's always so interesting for us to read. And now just a short off-road round with the Touareg for you. We've picked the off-road mode, so we have more ground clearance. Usual ground clearance with the steel suspension is 20 centimeters. If you have the air suspension, it starts at 19 centimeters. But since we have put everything in the off-road mode, we go 7 centimeters more up than a 26 centimeters ground clearance. And we need that here, for example, for the water. And you can see it here in the camera. The camera goes dark because it doesn't have any light anymore. And in water you have to go slow, that you don't build up a wave in front of you. It looks cool, of course, with the wave, but it might be coming as a backslash, and then maybe the engine sucks some water, and that, of course, would not be too good. But of course, it looks cool, and the sound you get then is also pretty funny. The approaching angle in the front, by the way, is 26 degrees here in the Touareg. Yes, that was higher in the previous generations. It was at 30 degrees. So indeed, it is a little bit less off-road capable, yes. Still, it is off-road capable, and we've shown it also in a couple of different episodes, mainly due to the air suspension, which you can pump up, and therefore it's still fun. It's precise to steer. Of course, keep your hands on the steering wheel when driving off-road, the thumbs up, that you don't dislocate them when the steering wheel goes nuts. And here, in those waves here, it's really a lot of fun, and due to this air suspension, it remains comfortable, although you're driving a very bumpy road. That's, of course, a pretty cool thing. The off-road pack that is available in the Touareg is not connected with the off-road gear reduction. That's not available for this new generation. However, you get an underfloor cover, all the off-road driving modes, and also bigger fuel tank. That would be the main reason to go for this off-road pack. And also a short off-road report here from the T-Roc. We go to the off-road mode. This car is equipped with DCC, dynamic chassis control, but it's just an adaptive suspension, so there's no air suspension, so you cannot lift the car up. However, we have almost 90 centimeters of ground clearance, which is again quite good for a vehicle in this segment. But of course, you have to pay attention that you don't hit the ground, so I can't go over those whoops here as fast as I would go with the Touareg. But I mean, if you go some soft off-road driving, that's actually possible with the T-Roc. So again, have to pay attention that don't hit the ground. Also with the approaching angle in the front, because it has quite sporty spoilers in the front there. But I mean, it also performs quite well considering. So it's not too rough, even if I go over those bumps here. And you can very precisely control it, so this progressive but yet easy to control steering also helps you here in soft off-roading. And you can have some splash there, and so far I didn't hear anything that it would be touching the ground or something. So also nice for some round here of mud playing with the T-Roc. And yeah, I mean, if you have an air suspension, of course, that helps you off-road massively. But here again, I don't get some big hitters in my lower back or something. We go left here, some more loose ground. Here we go. I love just riding in the sand. That is so cool because it gets a little bit loose. And in the off-road mode, by the way, you also have a little bit more wheel spin possible, so the electronic stability control is being drawn back, so you can play around with the car a little bit more. And the all-wheel drive here is not like a permanent one with the Touareg. In the Touareg you have 40% front, 60% in the rear base, and then up to, you can change a little bit then, 70% in the front, 30% in the rear is the maximum for the front setup. And it depends then, and for the rear maximum it's like 20% in the front, 80% in the rear. That's the Touareg with the permanent all-wheel drive. Here, Haldex clutch, so you have front-wheel drive, plus torque on demand also at the rear axle if you really want or need it. The car is doing that automatically, and depending on, you know, just the building style of the Haldex clutch, 50-50 front rear is the maximum that is possible. That's just physics, because if you have all the power at the front and then the clutch is being closed and transfers the power to the rear, AJ can explain it better to you even, he's our technical expert. So maximum of 50% of torque can be transported to the back. When manufacturers are telling you, do you go right or just straight again, I think? Where are they? Out again? Where are they? No, I think. We lost track. So, well, the thing is, if manufacturers are publishing some stuff about 100% at one wheel or so, it's not that the full power is being transported there. It's more that 1 or 2 or 3 wheels are being reduced in speed, and then of course the rest of the power that is remaining is just at one wheel. But it's not that it would get 100% of the power from the whole car, it's just that the other wheels are being held tight, and then all of the remaining power is there. So that's the basic difference then. Oh, that's great, yeah. So always fun to play in the off-road park. Here, by the way, if you go over some hills, slowly but steady. So you need some speed to go up, and that you don't just stand still then. There are also no special off-road tires mounted on this vehicle. But of course, I mean, I have a lot of experience now driving off-road in very different situations, and on camera it even looks always slower than it actually is. So when you feel the G-forces here, when you're going left and right and forward and stuff, it's way more dramatic than it would be looking on camera. But it's with all off-road sports. On camera it always looks very easy, but then in reality you feel what the car is actually enduring. But again, the car makes it pretty simple to handle, and I mean, yeah, it's definitely a street SUV, but you know, you can easily do the stuff we're doing here also with the vehicle without being the super off-road expert. So the blue Tiguan we had already had the so far available off-road trim, for example with this front bumper, which doesn't go that far to the lower ground, so that 24 degrees of approaching angle instead of 17. This is also part here, but this vehicle here you can see is the new off-road special edition, so like a special edition model. And you can see, well, the paint is, you know, free to choose, but this one here is a matte gray paint, also very interesting choice for sure. Then this off-road front bumper, which was already available, and at the side you can see it also has some silver contrast in the lower bumper part to stress the off-road look. In this case 20-inch rims, that looks really massive with non-off-road tires. Of course, if you would go for so big rims, you wouldn't really go off-road probably. So yes, this off-road pack is of course also, you know, big part visual. You don't have to go for those big rims, of course. But look at that car with those big rims, with the off-road contrast, and in this color, it looks super small, doesn't it? Like the blue Tiguan, the normal short wheelbase Tiguan we had, looks way bigger than this one at the moment. So, but that's just a visual illusion. Interesting, right? And then if we continue on over to the back, oh, by the way, off-road badge here too, with some mountain shape or silhouette. And at the rear, you got another silver contrast right there. Those ones are, by the way, always the sensors, you know, where the beeping sensors are. And last but not least, there are also some changes on the interior. First of all, like in the normal so far off-road trim, you also have the same off-road entry badges at the lower part. But then you get also special seats. They are fabric, but if you look in detail, they are suited for off-road riding a little bit because they have some rubber-like pads in the very detail. And that is then a little bit stickier to sit on, that maybe when you have them extreme off-road situations, you don't slide around too much. But again, I think the off-road pack you would rather pick if you just want this off-road look. However, the only real off-road stuff that comes with it, next to the all-wheel drive, this version will only be available with the all-wheel drive, is that it has an underfloor cover. And that's not the case with the normal off-road trim. Shall we see if we can find the underfloor cover? We can try to find out. So, I know how the normal Tiguan looks like from below, and this seems to be more massive than this. There was, I think, this like this part here. So I think on camera at the moment you can better see it than I do. I think it's predominantly there in the front. You know that the oil pan is protected. I think that part here in the front, that should be the underfloor cover that is additionally, because that looks indeed a little bit different as I was checking the other Tiguans. And now to our conclusion for today with the Volkswagen SUV lineup, our big comparison. Well, the smallest one and also the cheapest one, the T-Cross, was very versatile. So the package, when you consider the exterior dimension, then the room you get on the interior is really good. And it was also surprising, for example, if you compare it to the sibling, the Seat Arona, that the seats seem to be a little bit better, a little bit more comfortable. So this is really promising also for the driving impressions to come very soon. Overall, again, a great package and probably also one of the best price-performance ratios we have here. The T-Roc is the Golf SUV. It is also feeling like a Golf, also driving-wise, so it's a lot of fun to drive. Among the most agile ones for sure here in our driving setup. That is the strength of the T-Roc. The package is not as good as with the T-Cross. We have noticed that, so you have basically more room on the interior, especially on the rear bench in the T-Cross, and you're also flexible with the T-Cross, where we have the fixed bench right here. Overall, still a very good all-rounder car. Then the Tiguan. It's the midsize SUV. It sits in between. It is still also a good generalist. It has also a very good package if you consider exterior dimensions to the room on the inside. Special thing is here that here you have this, you know, segment above build quality, also with the more plush materials. It's more elegant also on the interior, and it is super silent. So the noise insulation here is really on the top level. The US Tiguan length, the long wheelbase, or also Tiguan Allspace in Europe, just offers you a little bit more space. It does not drive less agile or something. It's just a question about parking space that is available, or if you need some more room, for example, for your family. It's not much more expensive than the short wheelbase Tiguan, so this one then is also quite good price-performance ratio. And again, this Tiguan here, it is an SUV where you can say, I buy this even if I could afford a bigger or more expensive one, but I want that one because I want that somehow agile ride, the simpleness of the ride, and also everything is really easy to control. It's a straightforward car still. The Touareg, the luxurious one, offers a great luxurious ride, also with a lot of off-road capabilities still, especially with the air suspension which you can pump up, some more comfort, rear axle steering as a technology highlight, and you have a lot of things to enjoy on the interior. But it's not as straightforward as the other vehicles, and it's also very expensive if you compare it. So for what it delivers is way more expensive, but if you compare it to the premium competition, it's not one of the most expensive ones. So every car of those here we've shown you, it has their, you know, the own niche, the own uniqueness a little bit. The Touareg, for sure, the top of the luxury in the whole lineup. But then again, price-performance ratio is the worst in the segment. But of course, for sure, also a joy to drive it. Well, then here we have the Volkswagen Atlas, which is then, if you consider the overall room you have, in this case, the best price-performance pick. So I think if you are in Europe and want some city driving SUV, the T-Cross is the best pick. And if you are in the US, the Atlas is the best pick as to the price performance. So it always depends also where you go and where you live actually. Well, and overall the question is, about the Atlas. I think it's a very clever choice as for the price especially, because if you look at the overall prices, you get in the US the Atlas where you get a Tiguan right here, then of course it's a no-brainer. But then again, here it can make sense to go for a smaller SUV intentionally. Not everyone needs the biggest vehicle, and that's also the reason why we gave you this SUV comparison here today. Of course, I want to know from you now, which one is your favorite in exterior, interior, driving experience, and what is your overall favorite? Or are you maybe already owning one of those SUVs? Then please also share the customer comments there, your experience, that we can evolve this discussion even further. And did you like here our special SUV comparison episodes? Please leave it in the comments, give us some thumbs up, and also stay subscribed with the bell notification on. Here on Autogefuehl, your #1 resource for in-depth car reviews and your #1 community to discuss cars. Today with Thomas, next time maybe also with Brian and AJ. Stay tuned.